As you've probably heard from the numerous videos covering it, Alex Jones was recently removed from most major social media platforms. Regardless of if you like Alex Jones or think that he should have been removed, the whole ordeal has raised many questions about freedom of speech on the internet. I've said before that I believe that companies should be able to remove whoever they want from their services, for whatever reasons that they like. No, it's not fair that they selectively enforce their rules, but they are legally allowed to do it. I've always held this belief because I know that my constitutional freedom of speech only applies to the government. The government can't restrict my speech, but other citizens in small or large groups can kick me out of their groups if they don't like me. A big part of my worldview revolves around this idea that people should be able to do whatever they want. So as hard as it is for me to say that I want some kind of government interference, I'm starting to think that maybe the laws regarding free speech should be expanded to certain online interactions. As much as I hate government control, corporations can be just as oppressive if left unchecked. In recent years, we've been dealing with this issue a lot, even though you may not realize it. For example, if you support net neutrality, then you're supporting the government's interference in the use of infrastructure owned by corporations. People seem to want the internet to be classified as a utility, and for everyone to just be able to use it on relatively equal terms. I personally think that this could end up worse than most people think. Internet speed is already throttled by payment plans, and if it truly were a utility, you would pay based on data used, much like water or power, which would likely end up in a massive increase in internet bill for people like me, who are online uploading and downloading huge files pretty much all day. But that's beside the point. I'm not saying that every website should be completely free to the public and that no one should be able to ban you from their website because it would mean infringing on your freedom of speech, but if a social media site becomes big enough, so big that it has no real competitors and is the primary way that people communicate, maybe it should have some government oversight. The real dangers of large social media sites is that the political leaning of the site owners affects what people can see, and thereby affects their interpretation of reality. I know that sounds kind of heavy, so let me put it in more simple terms with a realistic scenario. Let's say that there is a social media site that millions of people use, similar to something like Twitter or Facebook, and the owners of this site support presidential candidate A, and they don't really like presidential candidate B. Well, the owners of this site can create algorithms and rules that favor candidate A. News articles speaking favorably of a candidate will show up more often in people's feeds. At the same time, articles speaking negatively of candidate B will also show up in people's feeds. The site owners can also simply ban those who speak too negatively of candidate A, or ban those who catch on to what the site is doing. This can all be done relatively unnoticed by the general public. They aren't necessarily aware of the site's bias. All they know is they've been seeing lots of news outlets and other citizens speaking about how great candidate A is and how terrible candidate B is. And this kind of public opinion can sway elections. So the question is, should corporations have this kind of power? That question has already been answered with other forms of media. The FCC already regulates TV and radio to make sure that no one person or group of people monopolizes what people see or hear. So it would follow that the same rules would apply to online interactions. And I'm not saying that all sites should work this way. I definitely don't want online government censorship in the same way that TV and radio is censored. But maybe the government should have some kind of say in what goes on certain sites with a large enough active user base. At the very least, sites or corporations that already receive some kind of government support. Corporations that are deemed too big to fail, for example. If you didn't know, certain corporations are too important to be allowed to go under. This is why you see government bailouts from time to time. Google is one such entity. Because government and military databases use Google's framework, and I hope I'm wording that right, if Google were to go under, the government and military would cease to function. For this reason alone, Google cannot fail and will always be bailed out by the government should it need to be. So how does this relate back to social media? Well, Google owns YouTube, and YouTube is certainly a place you can get banned from simply for having the wrong opinion, but it's also the main video hosting platform that people from around the world use without any real competitors. By virtue of existing, YouTube shuts out most would-be competitors, but because Google can't fail, YouTube will likely not fail. So in a tangential way, the government supports YouTube, but has no oversight on what goes on there, while at the same time making it almost impossible for any competitors to pop up. And even if that seems too convoluted for you, we know that Google as a search engine orders search results to reflect their left-leaning bias, and that any sort of user revolt to combat this would be completely useless because the company is backed by the US government. Regardless of if you think the government should have some kind of oversight on large social media platforms, I think that most people would agree that laws concerning it should at least be consistent. But that isn't the case either. Recently, President Trump's Twitter feed was deemed a public forum, and that the president is not allowed to block people from seeing it. And we aren't talking about the official presidential Twitter. This ruling was made concerning Trump's personal Twitter account that he created long before he was president. This makes almost no sense to me. Not only does it seem like a violation of personal rights, imagine the government telling you that you aren't allowed to block people on your Twitter account, but it just seems nonsensical to have this much power over a person's account and no power over Twitter as a whole. If the president's Twitter feed is a public forum where anyone is allowed to post, enforced by law, how can Twitter ban people from their platform and thereby deny them the apparent right to post on the president's feed? It'll be interesting to see how this affects the platform in the long run. As far as I know, Trump is the only person who this ruling has been made for, but there are people on Twitter who are more popular than Trump, perhaps even more influential. Will they be disallowed to block people as well? Excluding the president himself, PewDiePie has more followers than some of the most powerful people in the country. Can you imagine a YouTuber being told he's not allowed to block people, or not allowed to ban people from his streams, or not allowed to delete comments from his YouTube videos? In all honesty, I am a little bit afraid of the government interfering in things like this. Yes, it would be nice to not have to worry about being banned from everything for having the wrong opinion, but then the problem becomes that the government is watching me and dictating what I can and can't do online instead of a corporation. And I'm not actually sure which one is more scary. At least with corporations, I can always just use a different one. Maybe the government should start its own social media platform, something akin to Twitter, but that serves as a public forum where anyone can post, and the only way to get banned is to post something illegal. Though, based on how the government has worked on sites in the past, it would probably be a complete disaster, and I'm not sure that people would even want to use it because they know for sure that Big Brother is watching. Maybe what's best lies somewhere in between. It's not like we need something like the FCC to make sure social media sites don't get too big, but perhaps at a certain size these platforms are reclassified as a public forum that has to abide by a different set of rules. Or maybe we need some kind of Internet Bill of Rights, something that doesn't monitor specific sites, but grants general rules on how they can treat you and how internet interactions affect your life. I know I'd personally like to see a law that says you can't get fired from your job for things that you've said online on a personal social media account, but we'll see where the future takes us. Anyway, I'm Kothrix, and you have a wonderful day. Hey, thanks for watching. If you didn't already know, I stream gameplay on Twitch every weeknight at 9 p.m. And if you want to leave me $1 or $2, my Patreon link is in the description. Finally, I want to thank everyone who does support me on Twitch and Patreon.